The dispatch center hummed with the familiar buzz of servers and cooling fans at 2:17 a.m. I sat hunched over 3 monitors, tracking the pulse of the city through GPS dots and route algorithms. Officially, I was monitoring driver efficiency for MetroRide's night shift. Unofficially, I was tracking something far more personal. Jessica's Honda Civic showed up as a blue dot on my custom overlay. Route 47 to Mike Travers' downtown condo, the same route she'd taken every Tuesday and Thursday for 6 months, always claiming late procurement meetings at headquarters. The front door slammed downstairs. I minimized the tracking window and pulled up legitimate dispatch logs, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced ease. Footsteps echoed on the hardwood, unsteady and deliberate. "Elliot?" Jessica's voice carried up from the kitchen. "You still awake?" "Up here," I called back, keeping my tone neutral. "Just finishing the night reports." She appeared in the doorway of my home office, still wearing her charcoal business suit. Her lipstick was gone, hair slightly mussed despite obvious attempts to fix it. The scent of expensive cologne lingered around her. Not mine. "Working late again?" she asked, leaning against the door frame with forced casualness. I swiveled in my chair to face her. "Could ask you the same thing. How was the vendor meeting?" Something flickered across her face. "Long. Boring. You know how Mike gets when he's reviewing contracts." "I'm sure he does." I smiled, watching her carefully. "Must be exhausting, all those late nights at the office." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly. She stepped into the room, crossing her arms. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing at all. Just concerned about my hard-working wife." The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken tension. She was studying my face, looking for something. Suspicion? Knowledge? I kept my expression blank, almost bored. "You've been different lately," she said finally. Distant. Cold. I leaned back in my chair, still smiling. "Have I?" "Don't play games with me, Elliot. If you have something to say, just say it." The moment hung there, crystalline and fragile. I could end this now, confront her with everything I knew. Instead, I shrugged and turned back to my monitors. Nothing to say. Just tired. "Bullshit." Her voice rose, frustration bleeding through the careful control. "You barely look at me anymore. You don't touch me. It's like I'm invisible." I kept typing, fingers clicking across the keys. On my secondary monitor, I pulled up the route history I'd compiled over months of careful observation. 47 trips to Mike's condo, 17 overnight stays logged through her phone's location services, 3 hotel visits during supposed business trips. "Why don't you want me?" The words exploded from her, raw and desperate. "What's your problem? I'm your wife." I stopped typing. Slowly, I turned to face her again, and this time I let the smile spread across my face. Not warm, not kind, something else entirely. "You think I'll want you after Mike?" The color drained from Jessica's face in an instant. Her mouth opened, then closed, no sound emerging. Her hands, which had been gesturing emphatically, fell to her sides. "I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, but the words carried no conviction. I swiveled my chair fully around, leaning forward slightly. "Unit 47B, Meridian Towers. Corner of 5th and Madison. Nice view of the river from the balcony, I hear." Jessica's breathing became shallow, rapid. She gripped the doorframe for support. "You've been tracking me." It wasn't a question. "I've been tracking everyone. It's my job, remember? Route optimization, driver efficiency, location analytics." I gestured to the screens behind me. "Funny thing about GPS data, it tells such detailed stories." "How long have you known?" 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. I stood up, moving closer to her. "Since the first time you lied about working late and drove straight to his place instead of the office." Jessica's composure cracked completely. Tears started streaming down her cheeks, but whether from guilt or anger, I couldn't tell. Elliot, I can explain. Can you? Can you explain 47 visits, the hotel in Chicago during your procurement conference? The credit card charges at restaurants I've never been to? She was shaking now, backing toward the hallway. You don't understand. Mike and Oh, I understand perfectly. I followed her retreat, my voice calm and conversational. Mike Travers, head of procurement, your direct supervisor, married man with 2 kids, drives a silver BMW, license plate MXT4419, lives alone in that condo during the week while his wife stays at their house in Westfield. Stop. The word came out as a sob. You want to know my problem, Jessica? My problem is that I've been married to a stranger for 6 months. Someone who looks like my wife, sounds like my wife, but lies to my face every single day. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a thick manila folder, setting it on the desk between us. Geofence data, phone records, credit card statements, hotel key card logs, chat message recovery from your supposedly deleted conversations. I tapped the folder. Everything. Jessica stared at the folder like it was a venomous snake. What are you going to do? That depends entirely on you. I sat back down, the picture of calm reasonableness. See, I've learned some very interesting things during my little investigation. Things about Mike's vendor relationships, about invoice discrepancies, about procurement contracts that don't quite add up. Her face went from pale to gray. You can't prove anything. Can I? Mike's been very careless with his communications, especially the ones where he promises you that promotion after his divorce comes through. I opened the folder and pulled out a printed email. Quote, once I'm free and clear, the VP position is yours. We just need to be patient a little longer. End quote. Jessica's legs gave out. She slumped against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. What do you want? She whispered. I looked down at her. This woman I'd loved and trusted for 8 years, now crumpled and broken in my hallway. For a moment, I felt something that might have been pity. Then I remembered every lie, every fake smile, every time she'd come home smelling like him and kissed me goodnight. I want you to understand something very clearly, I said, my voice soft but carrying absolute certainty. The game is over. You lost. And now, we're going to play by my rules. Jessica looked up at me, mascara streaking down her cheeks, and for the first time in months, I saw real fear in her eyes. The trip's been canceled, Jess. All of them. The next morning, Jessica was gone before I woke up. Her coffee mug sat unwashed in the sink, lipstick stain on the rim like a small accusation. I found a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to work early. We need to talk tonight. Jay. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. We'd talked enough. At MetroRide headquarters, I settled into my usual routine with methodical precision. The dispatch center occupied the entire 3rd floor of a converted warehouse, banks of monitors displaying real-time traffic data and driver locations across the metropolitan area. My colleagues, mostly younger tech workers who called me old school, were already deep in their morning analytics. Morning, Elliot. Wes Martinez looked up from his workstation, coffee cup in hand. You look like hell. Rough night. I logged into my systems, fingers flying across the keyboard. How's the overnight data looking? Clean runs mostly. Few driver complaints about surge pricing in the university district, but nothing major. Wes rolled his chair closer. You working on something special? You've been burning the midnight oil a lot lately. I glanced around the office, making sure no one else was listening. Actually, I could use your help with something. Off the books. Wes raised an eyebrow. What kind of off the books? The kind where you help an old friend recover some deleted data, and I buy you beer for the next month. I'm listening. I pulled up a secondary terminal and opened an encrypted folder. I need chat message recovery, email forensics, and geolocation correlation. Personal project. Jesus, Elliot. This isn't about Jessica, is it? Wes had been my partner for 3 years, ever since I'd transitioned from military logistics to civilian dispatch operations. He was sharp, loyal, and had a talent for digital archaeology that bordered on supernatural. It's exactly about Jessica. I met his eyes, and I need to know everything. 2 hours later, we had our first breakthrough. Wes had recovered deleted WhatsApp messages from a backup Jessica thought she'd erased. The conversations painted a picture that was somehow worse than I'd imagined. "Look at this," Wes said, pointing to his screen. "She's not just having an affair, they're planning your whole life together." The messages were clinical in their cruelty. Jessica and Mike discussing divorce timelines, asset division, custody arrangements. My wife had been treating our marriage like a business transaction to be liquidated. "There's more," Wes continued, scrolling through the recovered data. "Financial stuff. Look at these expense reports." The procurement department's internal documents told a story of systematic fraud. Mike had been approving inflated vendor contracts, with kickbacks flowing through a network of shell companies. Jessica's recent promotion and salary increase weren't based on performance. They were payment for services rendered. "This is federal-level stuff," Wes whispered. "Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy. The SEC would have a field day." I leaned back in my chair, processing the implications. "How solid is the evidence?" "Rock solid. Email chains, financial records, vendor communications. It's all here." Wes looked at me seriously. "What are you going to do with this?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Can't do dinner tonight. Emergency vendor meeting. Don't wait up." I showed Wes the message. He checked his tracking system and shook his head. "No emergency meetings scheduled at headquarters today, but I've got her phone pinging at Meridian Towers again." "Of course you do." I stood up, grabbing my jacket. "I need to make a few calls. Can you compile everything into a comprehensive report?" "Already on it. Where are you going?" "To see Rita. If anyone knows the gossip about Jessica and Mike, it'll be her." Rita's bar occupied a narrow space between a laundromat and a check-cashing store, the kind of place that survived on regulars and served as the unofficial information exchange for downtown workers. Rita herself was a fixture behind the bar, 60-something, sharp-eyed, and possessed of an encyclopedic knowledge of who was sleeping with whom in the local business community. "Well, well," she said as I slid onto a bar stool. "Elliot Rourke in the afternoon. This must be serious. Whiskey. And information." She poured 2 fingers of bourbon and leaned against the bar. "What kind of information?" "The kind about Mike Travers and my wife." Rita's expression didn't change, but she nodded slowly. "Wondered when you'd figure it out. Half the procurement department's been talking about it for months." "What exactly are they saying?" "That Mike's got your wife wrapped around his finger. Promises of promotions, fancy trips, the whole 9 yards. She refilled my glass without being asked. "Also saying he's done this before. 3 times in the past 5 years, always the same pattern. Targets married women in his department, uses his position to leverage affairs, then discards them when he gets bored." The bourbon burned, but not as much as the confirmation of what I'd suspected. "What happened to the other women?" "Transferred out, mostly. One filed a harassment complaint, but it got buried. Mike's got friends in HR, friends on the board. He's untouchable." "Is he?" Rita studied my face carefully. "You planning something stupid, Elliot?" "I'm planning something smart. There's a difference." I finished my drink and left a 20 on the bar. If anyone asks, I was never here. "What conversation?" Rita smiled grimly. "But Elliot? Be careful. Men like Mike Travers don't go down easy." Back at the dispatch center, Wes had compiled a dossier that would make a federal prosecutor weep with joy. Bank records, email chains, vendor contracts, and GPS data that painted a clear picture of corruption stretching back years. "The beautiful thing," Wes explained, "is that Jessica's promotion put her right in the middle of it. She's not just a victim anymore. She's an active participant in the fraud." I studied the evidence. mind racing through possibilities. How long would it take to prepare this for external review? You mean like law enforcement? I mean like the Securities and Exchange Commission. Wes whistled low. That's serious firepower. You sure you want to go nuclear? They made it nuclear when they decided to destroy my life for their convenience. I closed the folder and looked at my friend. How long? Give me 2 days. I'll make it bulletproof. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jessica. Meeting running late. Probably won't be home until morning. Sorry. I deleted the message without responding. In 48 hours, Jessica and Mike would discover what happened when you underestimated a man whose job was tracking patterns and building cases from data. The game was about to change completely. Thursday morning brought unseasonably cold weather and the first crack in Jessica's facade. She came home at 6 a.m., looking haggard and defensive, clutching a coffee cup like a shield. Don't start, she said before I could speak. It was a legitimate business meeting. Mike's trying to close the Henderson contract before quarter end. I was sitting at the kitchen table, laptop open, reviewing Wes's completed dossier. The evidence was damning. Hundreds of pages of financial records, communications, and GPS data that would bury both of them. I'm sure he is, I said mildly, not looking up from my screen. Jessica poured herself more coffee, hands shaking slightly. You're doing it again. That tone. What tone? Like you know something I don't. I finally looked at her, taking in the expensive blouse I'd never seen before, the new jewelry, the subtle changes that should have been obvious months ago. Tell me about the Henderson contract, I said. She froze, cup halfway to her lips. What about it? Just curious. Big deal, I assume, given how much time you and Mike are spending on it? It's complicated. Procurement stuff. You wouldn't understand. I nodded thoughtfully and turned my laptop around so she could see the screen. Her face went white as she recognized the vendor invoices displayed there, inflated by 30%, with kickback payments routed through shell companies. You're right, I said. I don't understand. Help me out. Jessica set down her coffee cup with trembling hands. Where did you get that? Public records. Amazing what you can find when you know where to look. I scrolled through the documents slowly, letting her see the scope of what I'd uncovered. Henderson Industries, Meridian Solutions, Pacific Procurement Services, all owned by the same parent company, all billing your department at above-market rates. Elliot, this isn't what it looks like. It looks like systematic fraud, wire fraud specifically, given that the payments crossed state lines. I closed the laptop. What does it look like to you? She was backing toward the door now, the same retreat I'd seen 2 nights ago. I don't know anything about financial irregularities. I just process the paperwork Mike gives me. Is that what you call it? Processing paperwork? The words hung in the air between us. Jessica's composure finally cracked completely. Fuck you, she spat. You think you're so smart, sitting up there in your little cave, playing with your computers. You have no idea what the real world is like. Enlighten me. Mike appreciates me. He sees my potential. He's offering me opportunities you never could. Like the VP position he promised you, the one contingent on his divorce being finalized. Jessica's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. I stood up, moving closer. Here's what I think happened, I continued conversationally. Mike identified you as a target months ago. Married woman, ambitious, frustrated with her career prospects. He started with small favors, then bigger ones. Made you feel special, appreciated. And somewhere along the way, you stopped being a victim and became a co-conspirator. That's not true. Isn't it? Because according to the communications I've recovered, you've been actively helping him manipulate vendor contracts for the past 4 months. The Henderson deal alone netted your department an extra $200,000 in kickbacks. Jessica was crying now, but the tears looked more like rage than remorse. What do you want from me? I want you to understand that this ends now. All of it. Or what? You'll turn us in? Destroy my career? I smiled, the same cold expression that had terrified her 2 nights ago. Jessica, I already turned you in. The SEC received my complaint yesterday morning. The blood drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. She gripped the counter for support, staring at me in horror. You didn't. I did, complete with financial records, email communications, and GPS tracking data showing the correlation between your affair and the fraudulent transactions. I checked my watch. They should be reviewing the case file right about now. You bastard! You fucking bastard! I'm the bastard? I'm not the one who's been stealing money and sleeping with my boss while lying to my spouse for 6 months. Jessica lunged toward me, hands raised like claws. I caught her wrists easily, holding her at arm's length while she struggled. Let me go. Gladly. I released her and stepped back. Pack whatever you need for the next few days. You're not staying here. This is my house, too. Not anymore. Check your bank accounts, Jessica. I froze the joint assets this morning, pending the federal investigation. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, frantically checking her banking app. The color that had returned to her face disappeared again. You can't do this. I already did. Marital asset protection, perfectly legal when one spouse is under federal investigation for financial crimes. Jessica stared at the phone screen, then at me, then back at the phone. I'll fight this. I'll get a lawyer. Good luck affording one. She threw the phone at my head. I ducked, and it shattered against the kitchen cabinet behind me. I hate you, she screamed. I hate you so much. I know. I walked to the front door and opened it. Give Mike my regards. After she left, I sat in the sudden silence of my kitchen and allowed myself one moment of doubt. What I'd set in motion couldn't be stopped now. The SEC investigation would proceed regardless of my personal feelings. Jessica and Mike would face the consequences of their choices. My phone rang. Wes. Turn on Channel 7, he said, without preamble. I found the remote and switched to local news. The anchor was discussing a federal raid on the offices of Jessica's company, with footage of agents carrying boxes of documents out of the building. Jesus, I whispered. They moved fast, Wes said. Faster than I expected. Your wife and her boyfriend are about to have a very bad day. Through the kitchen window, I could see Jessica sitting in her car in the driveway, phone pressed to her ear. Probably calling Mike, trying to warn him. Too late for that. The news switched to footage of Mike Travers being escorted from the building in handcuffs, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face a mask of shock and rage. The trip's been canceled, I said to myself, watching my wife's world collapse in real time. The corporate all-hands meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon, a quarterly tradition where the company's leadership addressed the entire staff about performance metrics and strategic objectives. Under normal circumstances, spouses weren't invited. But these weren't normal circumstances. I straightened my tie and checked my appearance in the men's room mirror. The navy suit was my best, the one I'd worn to our wedding 8 years ago. It seemed appropriate. You sure about this? Wes asked, adjusting his own tie nervously. This is some serious public theater you're planning. Mike's been suspended pending investigation, but he's not fired yet. The board needs to see exactly who they're dealing with. I pulled a small digital recorder from my pocket. And Jessica needs to understand that her secrets aren't secret anymore. The main conference room was packed with employees, board members, and senior management. I spotted Jessica near the front, sitting with her remaining allies from the procurement department. She looked haggard, wearing the same clothes from yesterday, her usual polished appearance replaced by barely controlled panic. Our eyes met across the room. She started to stand, then thought better of it, sinking back into her chair with a look of growing dread. Ladies and gentlemen, the interim CEO began, before we address quarterly performance, we need to discuss recent developments in our procurement department. The room fell silent. Everyone knew about the federal raid, but official details had been sparse. As you're aware, we're cooperating fully with federal investigators regarding certain financial irregularities. Today, we'll be addressing these issues transparently and outlining our path forward. I raised my hand. Excuse me, sir. May I address the room? The CEO looked confused. I'm sorry, you are? Elliot Rourke. My wife Jessica works in procurement. I have information that might be relevant to your investigation. Jessica shot to her feet. You can't. Sit down, the CEO said firmly. Mr. Rourke, you have 5 minutes. I walked to the front of the room, pulling the digital recorder from my pocket. What I'm about to play is a conversation between Mike Travers and my wife recorded 6 weeks ago. Elliot, don't do this, Jessica pleaded, her voice carrying across the silent room. I pressed play. Mike's voice filled the conference room, clear and unmistakable. The VP position is yours once this all shakes out. We just need to be patient until my divorce is finalized. Then we can be together officially, and you'll have the career you deserve. Jessica's voice responded, What about the Henderson contracts? If anyone looks too closely at those numbers. Mike again. Let me worry about the finances. Your job is to keep processing the paperwork and keep your husband from asking too many questions. I stopped the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. There are 4 hours of similar conversations, I said, addressing the board members directly, all documenting a systematic scheme to defraud vendor contracts, manipulate procurement processes, and embezzle corporate funds. My wife wasn't a victim of Mike Travers' manipulation. She was an active participant. The room erupted. Employees were shouting questions, board members were conferring urgently, and Jessica was crying openly, her carefully constructed professional persona completely shattered. How did you get these recordings? The CEO demanded. My wife left her phone connected to our home Wi-Fi network. The backup files were automatically synced to our shared cloud storage. I held up the recorder. Everything was obtained legally, and copies have been provided to federal investigators. Robin Walsh, Jessica's closest friend in the department, stood up shakily. Jessica, tell them this isn't true. Tell them you were coerced. Jessica looked at Robin with desperate eyes, then at the board members, then at me. I can explain. No, I said quietly. You can't. I played another clip. This time it was Jessica's voice, cold and calculating. Elliot's too stupid to figure it out. He thinks I'm working late. Even if he suspected something, he doesn't have the connections to do anything about it. The words hung in the air like poison. Several people gasped audibly. Robin sat down heavily, her face pale with shock. The federal investigation is ongoing, I continued, but the evidence is overwhelming. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, tax evasion. Both Mike Travers and my wife are facing federal charges that carry potential sentences of 10 to 15 years. The CEO was conferring urgently with the board members. After a brief discussion, he returned to the podium. Mike Travers is terminated effective immediately. Jessica Rourke, you're also terminated, and we'll be pursuing full legal remedies for recovery of stolen funds. Jessica finally found her voice. You can't fire me. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent, I said. I'd suggest using it. Security guards appeared at the doors. The CEO nodded toward Jessica. Please escort Mrs. Rourke from the building. She's no longer an employee. As the guards approached, Jessica turned to face me one last time. The look in her eyes was pure hatred. This isn't over, she said. Yes, I replied calmly. It is. I watched as my wife was escorted from the building where she'd worked for 5 years, her career destroyed, her reputation in ruins, her future prospects non-existent. The room buzzed with shocked conversations as employees processed what they'd witnessed. Robin Walsh approached me as I gathered my things. How could you do this to her? She's your wife. Was, I corrected. And she did this to herself. But the public humiliation, destroying her career, It's so cruel. I looked at Robin, Jessica's friend, her confidant, her enabler. Tell me, Robin, how many times did you cover for her? How many lies did you help her tell? Robin's face flushed red. I don't know what you mean. Of course you don't. I headed toward the door, then paused. By the way, the federal investigators will probably want to interview you. As Jessica's closest friend and frequent alibi, you might want to get a lawyer. I left Robin standing there, looking sick and terrified, and walked out into the afternoon sunlight. Phase 1 was complete. Jessica's professional life was over, her income eliminated, her reputation destroyed. But I wasn't finished yet. Saturday morning found me at Rita's bar, nursing a coffee and reading news coverage of the procurement scandal. The local business journal had picked up the story, with headlines about federal raids and corporate corruption. Jessica's name was mentioned prominently. Rough week? Rita asked, refilling my cup. Getting better. I folded the newspaper. What's the word on the street? Mike Travers is radioactive. Word is he's been blackballed from every procurement network in the city. No one wants to touch him. She leaned closer. Also heard your wife's been making some desperate phone calls, trying to find someone willing to hire her. Any luck? What do you think? Her name's all over the federal complaint. She's unemployable. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Meet me at Meridian Towers. J. I showed Rita the message. She shook her head. That woman's got some nerve, asking you to meet her at her love nest. Actually, this is perfect. I finished my coffee and left money on the bar. Time for the final act. Meridian Towers was a sleek high-rise in the downtown district, all glass and steel and expensive views. I'd never been inside, but I knew the building intimately from months of GPS tracking. Jessica was waiting in the lobby, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Thank you for coming, she said quietly. What do you want, Jessica? I want to make a deal. I almost laughed. A deal? You're facing federal charges, you've been fired, and your boyfriend's probably going to prison. What exactly do you have to negotiate with? I have information about Mike's other victims, about board members who knew what was happening and looked the other way. Her voice was desperate. I can help the federal case if you'll just... If I'll what? Take you back? Pretend none of this happened? I made mistakes, she said, tears starting to flow. But I love you. I've always loved you. No, I said firmly. You loved what I represented. Stability, security, someone to fall back on while you played your games. The elevator dinged, and Mike Travers stepped out. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing rumpled clothes, his usual arrogance replaced by desperate fury. You son of a bitch, he snarled, advancing toward me. You destroyed everything. Mike, don't, Jessica said. But he wasn't listening. 5 years I worked on building those vendor relationships. 5 years of careful planning, and you ruined it all with your jealous husband bullshit. I stood my ground as he approached. Jealous? I'm not jealous, Mike. I'm thorough. He swung at me, a wild haymaker that I saw coming from across the lobby. I sidestepped easily and caught his wrist, using his momentum to slam him against the marble wall. Here's the thing about procurement fraud, I said conversationally, holding him pinned. It requires documentation, paper trails, digital records, all the things that make it easy to track and prosecute. Mike struggled against my grip. Let me go. In a minute. I leaned closer. First, I want you to understand something. Jessica wasn't your victim. She was your accomplice. And she wasn't my victim either. She made her choices. I released him and stepped back. Mike straightened his shirt, glaring at me with impotent rage. You think you've won? He spat. You've destroyed your own wife's life. What kind of man does that? The kind who doesn't appreciate being played for a fool. I turned to Jessica. Speaking of which, you should know that Mike emptied your shared account yesterday. The one you thought I didn't know about. Jessica's face went white. What? $43,000, I continued. Gone. Transferred to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. She spun to face Mike. You said that money was for our future. Plans change, Mike said coldly. I need liquid assets for legal defense. You bastard! Jessica launched herself at him, nails raking across his face. You used me! Mike shoved her away roughly. We used each other. Don't pretend this was some grand romance. I watched their relationship implode with detached fascination. 6 months of planning, scheming, and betrayal reduced to a screaming match in a hotel lobby. Well, I said finally, this has been educational, but I have places to be. Wait, Jessica called out as I headed toward the door. What happens now? I paused, looking back at her one last time. Now you face the consequences of your choices, both of you. Elliot, please, I know I hurt you, but we can work through this. We can rebuild. No, I said simply. We can't. I walked out of Meridian Towers and into the bright Saturday afternoon, leaving Jessica and Mike to destroy each other in the ruins of their conspiracy. Behind me, I could hear them still arguing, their voices echoing off the marble walls like the death rattle of their ambitions. The next phase would be legal and final. Divorce proceedings, custody arrangements, asset division, all the mundane paperwork that would officially end our marriage and secure my children's future. But the real victory was already complete. Jessica and Mike had destroyed themselves with their own greed and arrogance. I'd simply provided the documentation. The courthouse steps were slick with morning rain as I climbed toward the family court entrance. 3 months had passed since the federal investigation began, and today would mark the official end of my marriage to Jessica Rourke. My attorney, Margaret Forbes, was waiting inside with a thick folder of documents. She was a sharp woman in her 50s, with steel-gray hair and the kind of methodical precision that made opposing counsel nervous. How are you feeling? She asked as we found seats in the corridor. Ready for this to be over? It will be, very soon. The judge has reviewed all the evidence, including the federal investigators' preliminary findings. Jessica's legal position is challenging. That was lawyer speak for completely fucked. Jessica was facing federal charges for wire fraud, conspiracy, and tax evasion. Her career was over, her assets frozen, and her reputation destroyed. The divorce was just the final nail in the coffin. What about custody? Full custody to you, with supervised visitation for Jessica. Given her legal troubles and financial instability, the court considers her a flight risk. Jessica appeared at the far end of the corridor, flanked by a public defender who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, her once polished appearance replaced by the hollow look of someone whose world had completely collapsed. Our eyes met across the corridor. She started to approach, but Margaret stepped between us. My client has nothing to say to your client, she said firmly. 5 minutes, Jessica pleaded. Just give me 5 minutes to explain. Explain what? I asked. How you systematically betrayed our marriage while stealing money from your employer. How you plan to divorce me and take half our assets to start a new life with your boss? Jessica's public defender tugged at her sleeve. Mrs. Rourke, I strongly advise against continuing this conversation. I never meant for it to go this far, she said, ignoring her lawyer. Mike convinced me that we could make it work, that no one would get hurt. No one except me and our children. The kids need their mother. The kids need stability. They need a parent who isn't facing federal prison time. The courtroom doors opened, and a bailiff called our case. Jessica made one last desperate attempt to reach me, but Margaret guided me firmly toward the judge's bench. The proceedings were swift and brutal. Margaret presented the evidence methodically, financial records showing Jessica's participation in the procurement fraud, communications documenting her affair and plans to leave the marriage, GPS tracking data proving months of deception. Jessica's public defender tried to argue that she'd been manipulated and coerced, but the judge wasn't buying it. "Mrs. Rourke," the judge said sternly, "the evidence shows active participation in criminal conspiracy, systematic deception of your spouse, and financial fraud. This court cannot and will not reward such behavior." The final decree was everything I'd hoped for. Full custody of Sam and Lily, supervised visitation only for Jessica, division of assets heavily in my favor due to her criminal activity, and spousal support terminated due to her fraudulent conduct. As we filed out of the courtroom, Jessica made one final attempt to speak to me. "This isn't justice," she said, her voice breaking. "You've destroyed my life." I stopped and turned to face her fully. "I documented your choices, Jessica. You destroyed your own life. I loved you. No, you loved the security I provided while you planned your exit strategy." I looked at her one last time, this woman who'd shared my bed and my dreams for 8 years. "The difference is, I actually meant my wedding vows." Outside the courthouse, Margaret and I stood in the rain, watching Jessica and her lawyer disappear into the gray morning. "How do you feel?" Margaret asked. "Free." My phone buzzed with a text from Wes. "Mike Travers just pled guilty to federal charges. 15 years, minimum. Thought you'd want to know." I showed Margaret the message. She smiled grimly. Justice served. Almost. I looked back at the courthouse steps where my marriage had officially died. "There's one more thing I need to do." That evening, I picked up Sam and Lily from my sister's house, where they'd been staying during the legal proceedings. They were quiet during the drive home, processing the reality that their mother wouldn't be living with us anymore. "Is Mommy in trouble?" Lily asked as I tucked her into bed. "Yes, sweetheart. She made some bad choices, and now she has to face the consequences." "Will we see her again?" "Sometimes. But she won't be living here anymore." Sam, my 11-year-old, was more direct. "Did she really steal money?" I sat on the edge of his bed, choosing my words carefully. "Your mother got involved with some people who were doing illegal things. She made mistakes, and now she has to deal with the results." "Are you sad?" The question caught me off guard. Was I sad? Angry, certainly. Relieved? Absolutely. But sad? "I'm sad that our family is different now," I said finally. "But I'm not sad that the lies are over." After the kids were asleep, I sat in my home office, looking at the monitors that had started this whole investigation. The dispatch center hummed quietly, tracking thousands of routes across the city, each GPS dot representing someone going somewhere with purpose. Jessica's dot had disappeared from my screens months ago. She was living in a studio apartment across town, working part-time at a call center, waiting for her federal trial to begin. Mike was already in federal custody, his plea deal ensuring he'd spend the next decade behind bars. I opened my laptop and began typing a final report, documenting everything that had happened from the first suspicious route to today's divorce decree. Not for any official purpose, just for my own records. A complete account of how a marriage died and justice was served. The last line read, "Route canceled. Destination reached. Trip complete." I closed the laptop and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights spreading toward the horizon. Somewhere out there, Jessica was probably sitting in her small apartment, contemplating the ruins of her life. Mike was in a federal holding cell, beginning his long journey through the prison system. And I was home, with my children, with my integrity intact, with my future finally my own. The revenge was complete. Not through violence or illegal schemes, but through patience, documentation, and the simple power of truth. Jessica and Mike had destroyed themselves with their own greed and arrogance. I'd simply provided the evidence. Tomorrow, I would begin rebuilding. New routines, new possibilities, a life free from deception and betrayal. The kids would adjust, as children do. We would create new traditions, new memories, a new family structure built on honesty instead of lies. But tonight, I allowed myself one moment of satisfaction. The game was over. I had won. Not through luck or chance, but through careful planning and methodical execution. Jessica had asked why I didn't want her anymore. The answer was simple. I'd never stopped wanting the woman I married, but that woman had never existed. She'd been a carefully constructed fiction, designed to hide the calculating stranger who'd shared my bed and planned my destruction. The trip was canceled. All of them.